Blessings upon you today. Welcome to our Cornerstone Word for the Week. It's our weekly Bible study that also incorporates the upcoming Sunday school study as well. I'm Pastor A.T. Curry. As always, it's a joy and delight to share with you in the study of the Word. I'm super excited about our study today as we continue in this series dealing with profiles in faith. Profiles in faith. We're looking at different individuals within this 5-week or so series. And last week we looked at the faith of Ruth, and we looked at her interaction with Naomi. And I hope you were blessed by that. I know you'll be blessed by this study today, looking at the faith of David in a particular episode in his life when he's facing a giant named Goliath. And so I'm super excited about the study today. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17, that is, of course, the Old Testament. And the study is really from verses 31 through 50. But as always, I'd like to give us the context of the text. And so we're going to go back a few verses before that. One commentator has labeled this study as Facing Life with Confidence. Facing Life with Confidence. We're going to talk about that in the course of this study today, because when you think about it, Goliath had confidence himself. So what was it about David's confidence in contrast to Goliath's confidence? Matter of fact, even Goliath, I'm sure, had faith, clearly had faith. So did David. So why wasn't Goliath's faith able to have him take David out, whereas David's faith was enabling him to take Goliath out? And so it's an intriguing study for our consideration today, and we're going to be blessed when we get into this today. And so let's dig right into it. 1 Samuel chapter 17. And let's go on back to verse 28. Again, the setting is there's a Philistine giant. The Philistines are at war with the children of Israel, God's people, if you will. And for many days, they've been fighting down in the valley. You might wonder, why would they fight in the valley? Well, the Philistines, like other enemies of the children of God, then and now, had the mindset that our God was active and perhaps could give his people victory in the mountains, but that somehow our God, he was inoperative in the valleys. And so they always tried to attack the people of God in the valleys, in their low points, in the valleys. And so they've been fighting in the valley for many days, kind of like what's going on now with Israel and Hamas and all of that. And so they come up with this decision, the Philistines, why waste all of this blood? And as was the custom in many ancient civilizations, they would choose one individual to fight for the whole of the people. And whichever individual won that fight, the other people would have to be subject to their people. And so it was not totally uncommon. So here the Philistines said, well, we're going to put up Goliath, and you just send your best man and their fight, and whoever the winner of that fight is will be ruler over all the people. Their people will be over the conquered people. And so here we find David. Of course, he's been a shepherd boy watching over his father Jesse's sheep. His older brothers are out in the war. They're fighting. His father sends them out to check on them, sends them with food and the like to take to the troops. And he wants David to report back to him how things are going. And of course, when David gets there and he hears this giant Philistine insulting the people of God, and then our God himself. And he just can't take it. He says somebody has to stand up to this giant. But the people are so afraid of Goliath. They're afraid of this giant. No one wants to do it. And verse 28 says that Eliab, his eldest brother, about David's older brother now, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? Notice the shade the oldest brother is trying to throw on David. Why are you here? We're in the middle of battle. You're not fit for this type of warfare. You don't fit the build. And notice he doesn't say, and what happened to all of the sheep you've been supposed to have been taken care of. He says, instead of saying that, he says, with whom hast thou left those few sheep? So he's even trying to diminish what David does on the regular. And so just trying to downplay him. Don't be surprised in life. I'm sure that's happened to you. You showed up and was looking to help in a situation, and folk tried to downplay you, even those up around you who should have been encouraging you. Maybe he was overly protective of David, but you can tell from the language that he uses, he's really trying to downsize David. Again, whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? He says, I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And so his eldest brother is saying, oh, I know you and don't really trust you. Why are you really here? Verse 29, and David said, what have I now done? What have I now done? Which gives the implication that this is not the first time his older brothers have tried to downplay him. He says, what is it now, man? Can I just not come and watch the battle? I brought food for you from your father, from our father. And he says, is there not a cause? The Messenger translation says, what have I done now? David replied, I was only asking a question. Verse 30, and he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul. He sent for him. In other words, David had been telling them, now, if nobody will fight this giant, let me fight him. And word gets back to Saul, King Saul. Now, when you read this, keep in mind that Saul was the first king of Israel. Saul's the first king. David's the second king. Prior to them having kings, they had a theocracy. They were led by God, and so they had what you call judges, such as the book of Judges. And then they go from judges to king. They didn't want a God leader. They wanted a man leader. So they go from a theocracy to a monarchy, which the Bible says they should not have done. They, of course, should have stuck with being God-led and judges. But they wanted, and from the free will that God gives people, they decided no longer a theocracy. They wanted a monarchy. So they choose a king, and his name is Saul. He's tall, and he's built and all of that, strong man. And so he's the first king, but now he's somewhat on the decline. You gather that because he should have been the one fighting Goliath himself. So he's laying back at the cut somewhere. He should have been the one standing up to Goliath, but he's not. And so the Bible says that David says, well, I'll stand up to this Goliath. No one else wants to. And Saul had given orders to the people, if any man should stand up, bring me word. And so they go back to Saul and tell him. The Bible said they rehearsed everything David had said before Saul. And so Saul sends for him. Verse 32. So David gets to Saul. Bible says, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Talking about Goliath. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And here is Saul's reply to David. Saul said to David, verse 33, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. In other words, he said, you're just a young kid, and this man has been a fighting man of war since he was a kid. So Messenger translation puts it like this. Don't be ridiculous, verse 33, Saul replied. How can a kid like you fight with a man like him? You are only a boy, and he has been in the army since he was a boy. And so you see throughout the passage, David's own brothers are trying to downplay him. Now the King Saul, who should be fighting himself, is trying to downplay him. But listen to what David does in verse 34. You can see this necessary proponent of faith, this necessary ingredient of faith, I should say. David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. He said, you want to know how this boy can fight against a man who's been fighting since he was a boy. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. He said, thy servant kept his father's sheep. And there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock. Verse 35, and I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. Thy servant slew, verse 36, both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. And so we see one of the main ingredients of faith is relying on that which you already have knowledge of. So David says, my faith in God is built upon what God has already done, what I've witnessed and what I can testify to on my own behalf. I'm an eyewitness of what God can do based upon what God has already done. He gave me power to defeat the lion. He gave me power to defeat the bear. And I know that this, as he describes an uncircumcised Philistine, shall be as one of them. Yeah, so his faith is based upon what God has already done. And so when you look back over your life, you can see what the Lord has done, what he's brought you through. That's a real good, secure faith to have. Now, as I said earlier at the beginning, well, didn't Goliath have faith too? Well, why did his faith fail, and why did David's faith prevail? Well, not only must you have faith based upon what has taken place, but you have to be sure you have faith in the right thing and or the right person. See, anyone can have faith who has had some experience, but it's possible to have faith but have it in the wrong thing. Goliath had faith, but he had faith in himself, and it proved to be a faith that was futile. But David had faith, but he had faith in the living God, and that's the faith you can depend upon. And not only is that a prerequisite to have an effective faith, make sure it's in the right person, but then you have to step out on the faith. So many people think that having faith doesn't mean you never had any doubt. No. Doubt is not totally separate from faith. Matter of factly, if you never had any doubt, no faith would be necessary. You just go out and try to do it. Yeah. But you have to have faith because there is some uncertainty. There is some obstacle. There is something that you recognize could go the other way. Now, if you're just walking, not a whole lot of faith is necessary for that. But if you're walking and then want to jump over this chair, that takes a whole lot of faith. Again, Goliath had faith, but it was in the wrong individual. It was in the wrong person. It's in the wrong thing. It was faith in himself, his size, his stature, his strength. And that proved to be futile. It proved to be waning. And so he had faith, but it wasn't faith in the right thing. Yeah, so they both had faith, but David had faith in God. And then he stepped out on the faith, and was able to get the victory. And so verse 38, Saul, again, the king who should have been addressing Goliath himself, he, Bible says, armed David with his armor, and he put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also, he armed him with a coat of mail. And again, I told you Saul was a big, tall man, big, tall fella. David is normal in stature and size, and Saul's trying to put all of his equipment on David. And guess what? None of it fits. David didn't have any of it when he fought the lion. He didn't have any of it when he fought the bear. And so it was not comfortable to him. And you have to be careful whenever you are stepping out on faith and going to another level, when people try to put limitations on you and try to put brackets around you. Some people try to even live out what they've been afraid to do through you. And David says, no, I'm sorry, appreciate this, but none of this fits me. The Bible says, verse 39, David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. Again, he says, I have not proved them. In other words, what I do have faith in is what I have been using, and what God has helped me and delivered me with before. I've proved that. I know that's got a good track record. I'm confident with that. I have faith in what God has already blessed me with. Messenger translation puts it like this, verse 38 and 39. Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. I can hardly move, he exclaimed, and took them off again. Verse 40, then he picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them in his shepherd's bag, and armed only with his shepherd's staff and sling, started across to Goliath. Now listen, many people make light of this slingshot that David had, but it was a formidable weapon that was used at the time, and it was powerful. It was powerful if you knew how to use it. When you go back and read Judges chapter 20, verse 16, it was such a formidable weapon that you'll see there that there were people who were trained to use it, and they could use it with such accuracy. It would say they could strike from a distance and hit the hair, a particular hair on someone's head. Judges chapter 20, verse 16. Among all this people, there were 700 chosen men, left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at an hair breadth and not miss. And so don't downplay the significance of that slingshot if you knew how to use it. And so that's the type of slingshot that David had. You wrap it around palm of your hand, had a little pouch there, and you sling it like this, and then let it go, release it. And David obviously was very proficient at it. He had used it before. He was proven with it. But don't skip over this part, that not only does he go there with that, But he goes there with a stick. He goes there with a stick. Goes there with a stick. Yeah. A scrip. SCRIP. Goes with a stick. And you might say, well, what's the purpose of that? Perhaps it was to throw the giant off. And apparently it did, because what does the giant say when David goes down in the valley to confront him? He said, why would you send out this little kid to fight me? Am I like some type of dog? Why would he say dog? It's because dogs chase sticks. You throw a stick, the dog goes after it. David has a slingshot, but he has this stick with him. And so it, in fact, does throw the giant out. He's like, this is ridiculous. He said, this man is coming out here with a stick. Am I some type of a dog going after the stick? You know, what is the deal? And so verse 41, King James Version, the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. He's just a nice little good-looking kid, you know. And he says in verse 43, it says in verse 43, and the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? In other words, with this little stick in your hand. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Verse 44, the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Verse 46, this day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly, verse 47, shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Verse 48, and it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hastened and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. Verse 50, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine. Some think that the stone was more the size of a baseball, but it appears to be somewhat smaller than that, and that was all it took with pinpoint accuracy of David. And he smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. The lesson stops at 50, but I want to give you verse 51. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. So we don't know if the stone from the slingshot killed him, or if David taking the sword and cutting off his head killed him. But you know, whenever you have a snake in the yard, even after he's dead, I always like to cut the head off because I don't take any chances. Nevertheless, it's the faith that David had in the one and true living God, his stepping out on the faith that made him able to prevail over this giant. And if there are any giants in your life, any giant situations that seem unbearable, maybe they've been taunting you, maybe they've been nicking at you and bothering your conscience and your peace and your joy, The text is tailored to teach us if you keep faith in God, trust in him, step out on your faith, God is able to give you the victory. He'll bring your giants to their knees and enable you to gain the victory that you've been looking for. That's an amazing study today. Thank you for tuning in. We thank God for his word on today. I pray you've been blessed by that. I'm super excited about our study next week as we continue in Profiles in Faith. Next week, we'll be looking at First Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17, the family of faith. The family of faith. You've got to read it in advance. Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. May the Lord bless you and keep you real good. Again, thank you for tuning in to our Cornerstone study. I'm Pastor A.T. Curry. You all come check us out Sunday morning, 9 a.m. It's an hour of power here at Cornerstone 640 Ebenezer Church Road here on in Fayetteville, Georgia, right on the Fayetteville Peachtree City line in Fayette County, Georgia, every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. If you can't make it in person, always tune in on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. May the Lord bless you and keep you real good. Listen, if you'd like to give an offering today, won't you please do so? Help this ministry to continue to grow and expand and to reach others. You can give by way of givelify.com. Pull us up, Cornerstone Baptist Church, Fayetteville, Georgia. You can give by way of Cash App, $ C-Stone Give. That's $ CSTONEGIVE. You can write to us, send a check, money order by way of U.S. mail. Cornerstone Church, P.O. Box 2734, Peachtree City, Georgia, 30269. And we love to hear from you in that way. May the Lord bless you and keep you real good is my prayer. Talk to you next time. God bless.